Hi, everyone. Carmen here, digital editor Ms. Back again from the National Sexual Assault Conference. I'm with Christian Murphy from Catharsis Productions. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So why don't you walk me through what it is that you all do at Catharsis?
Sure. Catharsis Productions has been around since 2000. I co-founded it with my partner, Dr. Gail Stern. We created a program for college campuses back then called Sex Signals that still goes on today. And we do Sex Signals as well as other programs called The Hookup, another program called Beat the Blame Game, an online training called You Got This, all for colleges and military installations. We do about 1,200 live presentations a year now, all over the world. Yeah, we've been doing so. I think to date, I think we've done about 15 to 16,000 presentations. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. And what specifically do you do?
Well, I used to be an actor. I played myself on television or on stage, but when we wrote Sex Signals, Gail and myself wrote this program so the two of us could do an interactive, semi-improvisational program that dealt with gender role stereotypes, issues of consent, the social pressures and mores that are out there that, I think create boxes that both men and women sometimes feel themselves trapped in. And I was one of the presenters. She was one of the presenters. I did the show for about 10 years, and eventually I realized that I no longer could pretend to be a college student. I looked more like a creepy professor. So I was like, I really need to get out of being the presenter. So now I work behind the scenes, do some of the work with our team on creating new content, and work with our team on finding brand new presenters to do the work. And so it's just been an extraordinary gift to be a part of this movement, to be a part of this work.
And I was prompted to tell this question, but what did your daughter say when she asked you what you did?
Yeah,
when she found out what you did?
Yeah, well, I take tremendous pride in being a part of, I think, this very, very important dialogue and conversation. Really trying to get men as much, if not more so than women, to really understand their role in being responsible human beings. And understanding not only what consent is, but to take a stand against, the sexual violence being perpetrated oftentimes by men. At any rate, I was a professional actor for 25 years. And so when my daughter was born, I was still doing Sex Signals. Did that for 4 or 5 years. And then when a few years later I had stopped doing it, when my daughter was 7 years old, she was having a play date, the third play date of the day. And she said,
"Oh, such a busy social
she was
calendar."
Very busy. And she eventually said, Dad, as soon as that play date left, she wanted another play date. And I said, Vivian, you've already had 3 play dates. We're going to have to say no. We're getting ready to go out. And she's like, but I really want a play date. I said, no, Vivian, no play date. Please, Vivian, please, no. Dad, why not? And she said this 4 or 5 different times. And I said, Vivian, I said no. No means no. Do you know what I do for a living? And she said, I think, and I said, I talk about consent, and typically I talk about consent, a much more serious issue than this, but what you've done is you're trying to push on me something that I've already given you an answer. I would hope that you would respect my answer, just like if you say no to someone, I want them to respect your answer. So please understand that that's not appropriate. And she's like, wait, so you talk about consent for a living? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, that is so boring. I thought you were an actor. I'm so disappointed. And then, so she was disappointed, but then she became very proud in what I do and what our company does, and now likes to work for our company, she is a very, very proud feminist, very, very proud of talking about what we do and spreading the good word, amongst her friends, as she went through grade school. She's now in high school. So it's been a really, really neat journey that I'm glad to be able to share with her.
Yay! We're going to send your daughter many copies of Ms.
Yes, please do. Please do. I'm already bringing 3 home with me after reading yesterday. So,
yay!
Yay!
Well, and I guess, so can you walk me through sort of what one of your programs might look like?
Yeah. We, again, the approach we take is, it's a non-conventional approach to getting audiences that traditionally are going to be resistant to our messaging, getting them to feel more comfortable with what we're having to say. We've yet to, the irony is that even though we've been doing anti-rape programs or sexual violence prevention programs for 20 years, no one has brought us in and said, I'm so glad you're here to talk about rape because, I'm kind of on the fence. Can you tell me why it's wrong? Nobody ever does that. Everybody knows that rape is wrong, and everybody's going to say that they're doing what they can to stop it. The conversation, as far as we're concerned, starts only when someone says, I know rape is wrong, but, and then they insert a lot of victim blaming arguments in after that.
Yes.
That's when all the preconceptions come out. That's when everybody knows that sexual assault is wrong, but they have this one friend that was either falsely accused, or what did the person who says they were sexually assaulted, what did they do to put themselves in that situation? So really trying to use humor. First of all, we use humor to break down some of the defenses that we'll get from our audiences, but ultimately then poke holes in a lot of the victim blaming attitudes that still are around in our culture today, and really getting people to understand the nuances there, and hopefully recognizing that both, regardless of your your gender identity or your sexual orientation, we'd like to believe that we're all on the same team here, trying to keep people from doing bad things and trying to make sure that we have a healthy environment to have healthy sex in. Too often, I think what we've found is that when we do programs, especially for colleges, we are the first time that students have even had a conversation about sex, and we're not even talking about sex, we're talking about sexual violence. So I think sometimes our culture, the bar for even healthy sexuality is so low that you can understand maybe confusion that's out there. So I'm excited about what's been happening over the course of the last 10 years with the incredible, I think, movement that's been going on in, not only by advocates and activists, but also within high schools and college, those students really rising up and putting a voice to something that has for too long been unspoken about. And yeah, it's been really great to be able to generate conversations like this and have folks that you would never think would be interested in this discussion coming up to us afterwards and saying, like, I really thought this was going to be a really cheesy or weird event, but it was funny, but at the same time, I really learned a lot, and I'm really rethinking the way I do things, and getting them to be able to self-reflect on their own behavior, be able to feel hopefully without shame, so to speak, that they can do better, especially when it comes to bystander intervention and stopping their friends from doing these kinds of things. That I think is a big win, and I'd like to believe that we, in our own way, have had something to do with moving the needle.
Awesome. Well, and in this time, in this Me Too time, we're hearing a lot now about the fear in men, the fears that they have, that they don't want to mentor women, they don't want to hire them, they don't want to talk to them, they don't even want to know that we exist, they don't want to hang out with women anymore because they might get Me Too'd. Do you feel like, how do you feel like Me Too has sort of impacted your audiences? Are you hearing and seeing things from them? Are they directly addressing it with you? Do you feel like they're more receptive, less receptive?
Well, I think, we've, again, predominantly been working within the higher education. And I think that, again, the student of today, the 18-year-old of today is frankly light years beyond where the 18-year-old of 10 years ago was, in terms of being more inclusive, in terms of understanding this issue more, in terms of being more on board. You're going to get your pushback at various times, but there's definitely, I think there's been a more, if not formal education going on in K through 12, at least informal discussions between people, where ideally men in particular understand the bigger role and responsibility they play in this. I mean, for far too long, sexual assault has been seen as a quote-unquote women's issue. It can't be a women's issue if it's men who are predominantly creating the sexual assault. So let's hold men accountable to that when that's happening. And we also want to make sure that we recognize that men can be that men are victims and survivors of sexual assault as well. But as far as the kind of conversations we have, I would say that within the corporate environment, the older folks, you're getting a little bit more of that kind of a pushback. Where and I've heard, through acquaintances and through conversations I've had, that kind of fear. And I think it's not a surprising fear for me, but it's sad. And makes sense because so often men have lived in a fairly privileged world. It's just gendered white heterosexual man like myself. Typically, we don't have the same sort of challenges that many other folks have. And the irony is that when somebody says this is when a man says, I just feel like I have to watch my every move now. I kind of want I at times say straight up to them, well, it's like, well, welcome to being what it's like to be a woman, because there are women who are having to feel as though they have to watch their move just to keep themselves safe in many ways. And it's about time that we as men figure out how to be safer, so to speak, with them. So I like to be able to sort of, in a respectful way, call men out when they come up with these binary all or nothing statements like, I can't even make eye contact with a woman anymore. And I want to say, really? Is that really the case? I mean, I understand that there can be a certain level of concern and fear, and I can't, say to any man, if you do this, that, and the other thing, then you will never possibly be looked at as a problem. I can say there are a lot of things you can do to reduce your risks, though, of being seen as that. And if you're not incorporating those risks, if you're not incorporating that new behavior, then you really can't, complain about how the world is changing around you, because this stuff has been going on for a while, and it's about time we're held accountable for it.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that is really important. Also, I'm sorry that all of my hand motions.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm like, the battery in the laptop is dying, so I was just getting the charger out.
You played it off very well.
But
it was
I tried.
Smooth.
I tried. I knew where everything was. But while I plug it in, I just want to know sort of, I think a lot of people are interested in making prevention accessible to these folks who maybe aren't our, natural go-to of like, well, you're a male feminist or whatever. So how do you do that? How do you translate prevention and sort of put it into a language that fits with these, these specific audiences that you're talking to? And then hold that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I think what we really try to do is take it out of the legal framework and talk more about principle, talk more about ethics, if you will. Because once you start talking about whether or not people want to be a good person, most people want to sign up for that. So we say, let's stay away from having those legal discussions of how far can I go before it becomes sexual assault. It's like, if you're thinking about your sexual interaction in that way, you're already way down the wrong path.
Yes. When I was doing stuff on my campus, I was always like, what? Why are you asking me that question?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, so this is how consent works. And then it's like, well, is this okay? Okay, then is this okay? And I was like, why is this?
Yeah.
Like, what a strange narrative in your mind that you're just curious as to what, like, how far you can go towards what.
Right. Well, we'll sometimes say in our program, we'll talk about how consent really should be an affirmative, verbal, fully informed yes, enthusiastic yes. And people will say, it's just so weird to like get that verbal thing. Sometimes I'd just rather not do that. And it's like, well, why would you want to do that? It's like, because I'd just rather take the risk. And so we'll say, so here's the thing, if you are engaging with someone and you are not sure if they're on board, if your idea of getting consent from them is a maybe, then you may be perpetrating a crime, or you may be really hurting someone. So the important thing is to do whatever you can, even if it feels awkward in the moment, to have that dialogue. I mean, we'll talk all about the fact that how awkward condoms might be, and yet people use condoms because that's how you make sure that your sex is safer. The same thing can be applied here. Is it the sexiest thing in the world to use a condom, at least in that moment? Probably. It may not feel that way, but it's definitely something that people are willing to look over, look past if they're really enthusiastically committing to it. So
awesome. Well, and you're fantastic, and the work you're doing is fantastic. And I'm really, really curious about just sort of that trajectory of, you were a professional actor and now you are a professional advocate. And so I'm interested in what really called you to take this project on with Gail and to make that huge jump.
Well, I have to say, I was, when I met Gail over 20 years ago, I was immediately inspired and frankly blown away by the way she spoke about this issue, the way she used humor in a subversive way to get, again, mainstream audiences, the mainstream is the wrong word, get audiences that really needed to hear this message to sit up and see it as an issue they should be taking on. I was inspired by that, and I continue to be inspired by, having a real conversation. We so seldom, our culture is so coy on one level and frankly on another level at times completely terrified of having frank conversations about sexuality, and by extension having frank conversations about consent, and being able to facilitate that dialogue in a way where people can hear it and in a way where people can be honest and not feel like they're going to be attacked for being honest. I think again is really sort of moving the needle. So being at the end of the day, I like to make a difference as an actor, as a performer, but whether it was, but doing, selling toothpaste is one thing, being able to submit some sort of a voice to what I think is a much larger cultural need is just transcendently more exciting for me and more, I'm at a loss for words, just more exciting for me to be a part of it. And I think, I thank my partner Gail for making that happen.
Awesome. Well, yeah. And I mean, I think that is sort of that's come up a lot in my conversations with people this week, is sort of the fulfillment that comes from doing, work that's really making an impact. It's, it's a gift, even though it's sort of a strange gift, and it's weird to be grateful for like the world problems that we work to solve. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's nice to know you're making a difference.
And it's one of those things where I think with our program, we'd like to be able to provide a level of hope that there can be a world where people feel more comfortable having these conversations, having honest dialogue, in an intimate situation, not being afraid of that. And, because we all have friends, or we may have even personally been really impacted by sexual violence. And the more often we can get this out into the open to have real, true conversations about it, I think hopefully the less likely these kind of things will be going on.
Well, and that's a perfect lead into my last question, which is the question I've been asking everyone, because the theme of the conference is Bold Moves, Ending Sexual Violence in One Generation. And that is a very large undertaking. And it's going to take a lot of bold moves to get there. So I'm wondering, what's your next big, bold move?
Our next big, bold move is to continue developing programs for various what we would call ecosystems. Right now, we do a lot of work within the military and higher education. Too often, let's say in higher education, for instance, schools will, even with the best of intentions, just bring in one program and think that an orientation program that talks about sexual assault will suddenly make it all better. We know that one program is not going to change a culture. So the more often we can, within our own company, within our own individual communities, create multiple programs that have message alignment, so you're constantly keeping that dialogue moving forward and touching and reaching people at different points within that particular ecosystem, whether it's through their matriculation process, if they're students, or if they're administrators or faculty members. If you're able to have ongoing discussions that really combat some of the very toxic messages that continue to permeate our culture, the better chance you have at really changing that community for the better. So our big bold move is to not only continue developing that kind of scaffolded programming and curriculum within colleges and universities, but ultimately be doing it within other environments as well, whether it's the corporate market, in the K through 12 ecosystem, so that ideally, and this is a very grandiose thought, but down the road, there could be individuals who have an opportunity to see a Catharsis program when they're in grade school, when they're in college, when they moved on to a corporate environment, and see multiple of those programs, or at least be getting those messages in multiple ways at various times over their own personal journey and evolution, and then how we can be impacting communities as well. And so we're also looking for partners to help us do that. It's not just the Catharsis way, it's about how you bring innovative and dynamic approaches and tactics to these kind of conversations to make them happening more often and in a more lively and authentic way.
Awesome. Well, thank you for this conversation. I enjoyed it, so I highly recommend Catharsis programs and spending more time with you.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and for being at this conference and for all the work that you do.
Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for everything that Miss has been doing. The articles and the editions I've seen have just been mind-blowing. You continue to have an incredible impact, obviously, on our world, and I'll stop mansplaining myself now because I've taken up far too much time on this in this interview.
No, that was the point. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.